Hello, APUSHers. I just wanted to make a quick video about all the updates that have come out about the AP U.S. history test. There's been some big changes, so let's check them out. First off, we knew it was going to be 45 minutes. But the big changes, and a lot of us were guessing that it was going to be an SAQ set of like 3 or 4 SAQs, but instead it's going to be a 5-document DBQ. And so I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around that about how to best support you and prepare you for the AP test. But there's also some other changes to the DBQ too, specifically the rubric. So before we get into that though, let's take a look at the times. May 15th is going to be the regular test date. You can see the times there. So our time is going to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is kind of nice actually, because our original time for a normal test was on May 8th and it's in the morning. So now early afternoon, I think that's a solid time to be awake and ready to write a great DBQ essay. Now there are June 3rd makeup dates. To my knowledge, that is only for special situations. Now, there might be a lot of special situations though too. Like for instance, if your internet cuts out in the middle of taking the test on the regular test date, I'm pretty sure that you can then do the makeup test. Or if there's just some other extenuating situation, they're going to be a bit more open with allowing for the makeup test. So there you go. All right, this is the overview of the DBQ rubric, of the modified DBQ rubric. I'm going to go over each individual point though, but let's just kind of go over the overview. First off, the question presents students with 5 historical sources. This is a change instead of it being 7, one of which will be non-text based. This question assesses the student's ability to respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. No change there. Describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. No change. Support an argument in response to the prompt using at least 4 documents. Okay, this is a change, and then they have an additional point in there that I'll get to later. Use at least 2 additional pieces of this specific historical evidence. Okay, that is another change too, and I'll get to more about that later on, but instead of 1 point, it's going to be 2. The same thing for the next one. Instead of 1 hit point, so for at least 2 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, situation, or audience is relevant to an argument. There's going to be 2 separate ones for that hit point, which we'll take a look at in a second. And then the last point is the same one as before. That's that complexity point. Okay, so let's jump into those points. First thing is the 5 historical sources, one of which will be non-text based. So the big difference is it's 2 less sources than the typical DBQ. Typical DBQ was 7 sources, and you had to use at least 6 of them well. In the past, we've always seen, 1 or more of those sources be a map or an image, a lot of times political cartoons, a graph, or a chart. So they're going to tell you one of these will be a non-text-based source, while the other 4 will definitely be a text-based source. Okay, respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. There's really no difference. We've been working on thesis statements for a long time. So this stays the same. You need to fully answer the prompt. Make sure you carefully read through that prompt and every single part, that you're addressing every single part of that prompt. Of course, you need a position and main points. That's a thesis that covers all parts of the prompt. Like normal, don't be vague. Do not put there are many economic, political, and social changes. That's not going to get you a point. It's way too vague. Be more specific with your claim. Do those things that we've been working on in DBQ workshops when we're looking at the main points of the documents. Where does the evidence lead you? If you're thinking about the documents when you're making your claim, that's going to make writing your essay a lot easier. And there's going to be a more emphasis on this new rubric on using that specific evidence, okay? So historical context, again, we've been working on this all year, and it's the same as before. It's a little bit devalued now, though, because it's only 1 out of 10 points instead of 1 out of 7. But technically, it can come in any part of your essay. But as we've been doing all year, the best place to put it is in the intro and before your thesis. So your intro should be very large. Your full paragraph should be 4 to 5 solid sentences with context, and then your thesis right after that. So for example, let's say it's about the women's rights movement, late 1800s to 1920. Okay, if you're going to do the context, talk about how does the women's rights movement fit in with the overall progressive era of that time period? What's going on in the progressive era? You know, talk about the progressive presidents, talk about Jane Addams and the Hull House and Jacob Riis and how the other half lives, and then narrow it down to like Alice Paul and the women's rights movement. Okay, so let's talk about this is a somewhat of a change from the other rubric. So you need to support an argument in response to the prompt using at least 4 documents. And there's 3 kind of separate points in here. The first point is the easiest to pick up. You just use 2 documents. Now, this isn't just quoting from the document. And, you know, I've emphasized don't quote, you know, much at all in the documents. Put things into your own words. But at least twice you use documents, and, well, 2 documents. And they don't necessarily have to support your argument. You just use 2 and you get that 1 point. The second point is just use 2 documents, and you're going to use 2 anyways to get that first point, but just have them support your argument. Remember those magic words. This shows, and then relate it back to your argument. What does it show in your argument? So what's the main point of the document? And then this shows. Third point. Do what I just said for 4 out of those 5 documents. So let's say that one non-historical text-based one is a graph you just don't get. All right, well, to save time, you might want to skip over it as long as you make sure you use those other 4 really well. I always recommend use all 5 documents, because maybe one that you mess up and you don't know that you messed up the interpretation of that document, well, you still have the other 4 to save you. But if you got one that you really are struggling with and you don't understand it, but you understand the other 4, okay. All right. So use at least 2 additional pieces of specific historical evidence beyond that found in the documents and relate it to an argument about the prompt. So before, it was just 1 piece of evidence, and you need to talk a lot about that piece of evidence. It can't just be a short little blip. And it can't be related to a document either, because that could be context for a document. It's got to be its own separate thing, its own act of Congress that you discuss, its own major event or individual that has had a huge impact on whatever the topic is that wasn't found in any of the documents. Now you can do this 2 times for 2 points. And again, you got to relate it back to the argument. So those magic words, this shows. So use the evidence, and then this shows what? Go back to your thesis. What does it show in your thesis? Hit point, our favorite point. This is the same as before. It's set, except the requirements kind of pared down a bit. Before, you just get 1 point if you use 3 of those documents. Now, 1 point for 1 document, and either doing point of view or purpose or situation. It's like the context of the document, or audience. And a second one for doing it for a second document. I think this is a really attainable point. We've talked about how I think purpose is the best one to use, because you're probably going to be talking about the purpose anyways of a document when you're relating it back to your argument. And that's the other key thing, is it's got to relate back. It's got to be relevant to an argument. You can't just like throw, and the point of view is, or and the intended audience of this document is the United States, is the people of the United States. Okay, you probably say that about almost any document, but how is that related to your argument? So, you know, I personally love the purpose, because you're probably going to be talking about purpose anyways. Just put that word in there. And the purpose of this document is. All right, the last one is that tough point to get. It's rarely dealt out. You know, there are all these different kind of sub points, sub ways to get it. You know, as a reader for the last 4 years, you kind of know it when you see it. And we see it very rarely. I think it was something like only 0.3% of DBQs typically end up getting this point. I might be wrong on that, but it was a very, very small amount. So I would just say, don't focus too much on trying to pick up this point. Just try to focus on writing a great essay where documents and ideas connect. And, you know, you might get the point if it's just a really, really solid essay. Okay, so what's the overview of the points? 1 point for contextualization, 1 point for thesis, 3 point for document usage. How do you get all those 3? Use 4 and relate it to the argument. 2 points for outside evidence, 2 hit points, 1 for the complexity. So it's a 10 total points. This does kind of change the ratios here and what is emphasized on the test. It does devalue the contextualization and the thesis points, because before, it was 2 out of the 7 points, and now it's 2 out of 10. Obviously, still focus on those things. You need a solid thesis to be able to get these other things. Well, I guess technically you don't have to have a solid thesis to get these other things, but it really helps out a lot. And then the other thing too, it puts more value on the evidence from both docs and outside information hip. Now that's 7 out of 10 instead of 4 out of 7. So we have a much higher percentage of the test coming from using and analyzing the evidence. A few other things, time periods to focus on. There will be nothing, the DBQ will not be in periods 1 or 2 or 8 or 9. So nothing up to the start of the French-Indian War. That means no Jamestown, no Puritans, no encomiendas and Spanish colonization, and then nothing in periods 8 and 9, no Cold War, no Nixon, Vietnam, Reagan, none of that. It's just from 1754 to 1945. So that kind of helps out a bit, right? I mean, how much actually happened in that time period? Should be easy. Okay, some other information. I was kind of surprised to hear this, but I took this quote straight from the additional information on the College Board on their page here. It's considered an open book or an open note. And we're going to talk more about this as we lead up to the test. I plan on creating some helpful one-pager materials that will help you quickly categorize documents and everything. I'm working on that right now. And you're not going to have time to sit there and look up information about documents when you have to write an essay in 45 minutes, either handwrite or on there. So you have to analyze the documents and then write the essay. This is a time crunch. So while it may be open book and open note, don't get too excited about that. I don't know how much you're actually going to be able to use additional information with the time you have. Students can type or write their response. So I think most people will probably be typing it. Maybe some will be writing it. I don't totally know how this is going to work, but they say in there that you're going to get an additional 5 minutes to upload your response. So I'm assuming if you write your response, then you need to probably take a picture of it and then upload it. That's what I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure more information will come out about this in the future. The students also need to log in 30 minutes prior to the test starting. I'm not sure about what kind of platform they're going to use that. Maybe they're going to use their AP Classroom platform. They already have it developed, so that wouldn't surprise me. But I'm sure more information will come out soon. So overall, you have 45 minutes to read and respond to the question, and then that 5 minutes additional to upload the response. All right, and that's all I have. When more information comes out, I'll let you know, and I will be working on, helpful review videos starting really soon. Okay, have a great day and spring break.